Hardhome shows up in the text in a strange way. It's not introduced as an active location, not somewhere people travel to or trade with. It comes up as something that used to exist and then didn't. A harbour, a place people gathered, a settlement that had started to take shape, and then one night, it's gone. What's left behind in the accounts is inconsistent in detail but consistent in tone. Fire bright enough to be seen from the wall, ash falling for months. When people return later, they don't find a ruined town in the usual sense. They find something closer to complete devastation. And whatever happened there, it's enough that 600 years later, the place is still avoided. That's where the problem starts. Hello everyone, and welcome to Storyteller's Codex. Here we delve deep into the rich lore of the Lord of the Rings, a song of ice and fire, and the vast worlds beyond. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Before it's destroyed, Hardhome doesn't fit the usual pattern of life beyond the wall. Most free folk groups move, camps form and break apart, settlements don't usually last. Hardhome looks different. The world of ice and fire describes a sheltered bay, a natural harbour deep enough for large ships, and access to nearby resources: wood, stone, fish, sea mammals. That combination matters, because it supports something more stable than a temporary camp. We're also told that 4 chieftains shared power there. That's not a kingdom, but it is a form of organised leadership tied to a fixed place. And then there's the Maester. A Maester travels north and stays there for 3 years, studying the people living at Hardhome before leaving in a hurry. That alone suggests that for a time, Hardhome was stable enough to attract sustained attention from the south. So before anything goes wrong, you have something unusual. A place where the free folk aren't just passing through, but staying. And that makes what follows harder to explain as something routine. The closest thing we have to a direct account comes through John's chapters. Hardhome, we're told, had been halfway toward becoming a town, until the night 600 years ago when hell had swallowed it. And then the details come in pieces. A fire, large enough that watchers on the wall thought the sun was rising in the north. That alone sets the scale. After that, ash falls over the surrounding region for months. Not days, not weeks. Long enough to settle into memory as part of the event itself. When traders return later, they don't describe a burned settlement in simple terms. They find charred trees, burned bones, waters filled with swollen corpses, and then there are the caves. The cliffs above Hardhome are full of them, and the reports mention sounds coming from inside, shrieks echoing out across the bay. On top of that, the stories diverge. Some say the people were taken into slavery. Others say they were slaughtered. Some accounts blur the two together. There isn't a single clean narrative, but the physical destruction, fire, ash, death on a large scale, that part is consistent. If you take those details on their own, the first instinct is to look for something natural, a volcanic eruption or a meteor strike, something that could explain a fire visible from the wall and ash falling for months afterward. But when you compare that to what's actually described, there are gaps. There's no mention of a crater, no lava flow, no lasting geological change that anyone records. Just intense burning, followed by devastation. And then there are the other elements layered on top. The bodies in the water suggest people trying to escape or being forced into it. The reports of abductions don't sit easily with a purely natural disaster. And the sounds from the caves, whatever they were, don't fit cleanly either. You can account for parts of the event with a natural explanation, but once you try to account for all of it at the same time, it starts to break down, which is why most explanations end up combining more than one cause, rather than relying on a single event. One of the more structured explanations starts from a different angle. Not what happened at Hardhome itself, but what it might have looked like from far away. Around that time, Braavos is beginning to grow, but its location is still meant to be secret. A city founded by escaped slaves, actively hiding from Valyria. But secrecy doesn't mean invisibility. Ships still travel. Routes still exist. People would have a rough sense that something is there, somewhere along that coastline. So if word reaches Valyria, or anyone operating within that system, that there's a growing settlement of free people in that direction, it could be misread. Hardhome from a distance might look like the thing they're trying to find, and if that happens, the response wouldn't be subtle. Dragons would explain the fire, the scale matches, slaving ships could explain the reports of people being taken, as well as the bodies left in the water. It lines up with several of the details we have. But it doesn't close the gap completely. There's no clear reason why such an event wouldn't be recorded or spoken about more widely if Valyria believed it had destroyed something as significant as Braavos, and the elements around the caves, the sounds, the continued disturbance after the main event, don't fit neatly into that explanation. So it works in parts, but not as a complete account on its own. Another line of thinking starts from inside Hardhome rather than outside it. The geography matters here. Cliffs, caves, a settlement built up against them. That alone raises questions about what might have been happening there beyond ordinary habitation. Some theories suggest involvement from the Children of the Forest, or something tied to older forms of magic. But when you look at what we actually know about them, the fit isn't clean. Fire on that scale doesn't align well with how they're usually described, so the focus shifts. Instead of who caused it, the question becomes whether something was attempted. Some form of ritual, something meant to achieve a specific outcome, possibly connected to protection, or to the others, and then failing. That would account for the lack of a clean physical explanation. It would also leave room for the more unsettling details. The sounds from the caves, the sense that whatever happened didn't end cleanly with the fire itself. But again, the issue is evidence. There's no direct mention of a ritual, no surviving account that describes what was being done. What we have are conditions that make the idea possible, and an outcome that doesn't fully align with simpler explanations. So like the Valyrian theory, it explains part of the picture, but it still leaves gaps. The explanation that tends to line up with the most details is also the least dramatic on the surface. Disease. Grayscale is known to spread quickly in the right conditions, especially in cold, damp environments. Hardhome, as a coastal settlement, fits that almost exactly. We have a direct comparison from Old Town. When the Grey Plague hit, it moved fast and killed a large portion of the population, and that's in a city with maesters, structure, and some understanding of what was happening. North of the Wall, the response is different. Val tells Jon that Grayscale isn't something you risk. Even when it's dormant, she argues it should be ended before it can return. So if something like that appears in a place like Hardhome, the response wouldn't be containment in the southern sense. It would be immediate and extreme. Burn the infected, burn the settlement, stop it from spreading. That lines up with several parts of the account. The fire, the scale of death, the lack of survivors who could give a clear report afterward. Even the shrieking from the cave starts to make more sense if you consider people in the later stages of the disease, isolated or left behind. It doesn't explain everything, but it explains more than most single-cause theories do. Even if the initial disaster started within Hardhome, that doesn't mean it ended there. The aftermath matters as well. Skagos lies relatively close, and the Skagosi are known for raiding. The maesters themselves suggest them as a possibility when discussing what happened. If Hardhome was already weakened, burned, disorganised, people trying to flee, it becomes an easy target. That would account for some of the details that don't fit a single event. People being taken into slavery, bodies left in the water, additional violence layered on top of whatever had already happened. There are also smaller details that line up. The Skagosi call themselves the Stoneborn. They live among rocks and caves. That overlaps, at least visually, with the descriptions of Hardhome's cliffs and cave systems. None of this proves direct involvement, but it allows for a sequence rather than a single cause. Something happens at Hardhome, fire, disease, collapse, and then other groups move in afterward, taking advantage of the situation. And that combination explains more than either element on its own. Hardhome doesn't stay in the past, it comes back into the story in A Dance with Dragons, and the way it reappears is worth paying attention to. After the defeat of the Wildlings at the Wall, a large number of them regroup under a wood switch called Mother Mole. She leads them to Hardhome with the specific claim that ships will come, that they will be taken south, and ships do arrive. Arya hears about slavers picking people up and heading back toward Essos. Then Cotterpike reaches Hardhome with ships from the Night's Watch sent by Jon. But the situation doesn't stabilise. Instead, it starts to deteriorate. Pike's letters mention chaos, Wildlings fighting to get on the ships, bad weather trapping them there and then something else. Dead things in the water, dead things in the woods. Melisandre's vision adds another layer. Snow and ash moving together in the air, fires burning in caves beneath a cliff, then cold overtaking everything, putting those fires out. What stands out here is not just that Hardhome becomes dangerous again, it's that the same elements return. Fire, ash, people gathered in large numbers, then something going wrong. When you step back from all of this, the main limitation is clear. We don't have a complete account. Every explanation we've looked at fits part of the evidence, but not all of it. A natural disaster explains the fire, but not everything that follows. Valyrian involvement explains the scale and the possibility of abductions, but leaves gaps. Disease explains the burning and the scale of death, but doesn't cover every detail. So instead of a single cause, what we're left with is a combination. Hardhome was a place where the free folk gathered in unusually large numbers. Something disrupted that, whether disease, attack, or something else. And once that disruption began, other forces may have followed, compounding the destruction. The same pattern seems to be forming again in the present timeline. Large numbers of people gathering in one place, under pressure, with limited options. And Hardhome, for whatever reason, does not seem to hold that kind of concentration safely. That may be coincidence, or it may be the closest thing the text gives us to a pattern. If you're interested in The Lord of the Rings or A Song of Ice and Fire, click one of the links on the screen to dive deeper into the lore. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you next time.